Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins. I'm here with author and coach Carl Massy, who I had the pleasure to meet in the last few years. And so welcome, Carl. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm pretty excited about that. I was having a bit of jittery nerves as I was in the green room there waiting for the intro to come in. I'm good to go. So I was just going to say, just so everyone knows, I'm recording this in Bali. So if there's some roosters in the background, if there's some temple music playing or something else, just be aware that may occur over the course of this. So thanks again, Beth. And
you're very welcome. Yeah, so we'll get started in a minute or two, and I will make a good introduction for you or of you. And I just want to let people know that we are live on Facebook and YouTube and X, Rumble, Rockfin, and Vigilante TV as well. That bumper music that you just heard is by my son, who is AKA Psycho on YouTube. So you can click that link there to sub to him. That's our deal, that he lets me use his music. And then if you guys can sub to him, that'd be great. And good timing, yeah, for this topic. This is a nut to crack, this one. So if you're not familiar with Carl's work, then I'll just let you know you can find him at carlmassy.com. And here is your bio. So it's written in the first person, which I always love about bios, because otherwise, you're not a corporation, you're not a whole, group of people over there, and it's just great not to talk in the third person all the time. And so Carl says he has this condition where he doesn't like seeing people do life harder than it needs to be. And I know that's a huge program in a lot of people's lives where they, I in fact, when I teach people to do goals, I always get them to put the word easily in there, because we have this program that it needs to be hard. So I definitely could relate to that. And it causes words to come out of his mouth like stop, or I want to know an easier way. He says, having coached hundreds of people over the last 16 plus years and written about physical and mental health for 20 years, he's observed thousands of times where people make bad choices unnecessarily. In his 6th book, he got very vocal, specific, and clear as possible about where he sees 18 of the biggest making life way harder mistakes being made. One mistake might be okay, but 45 mistakes stacked up, life stops being fun or easeful. So he considers himself a life strategist, having been an Australian Army major, which I want to hear more about, and a consultant to the Olympic Games for several years, plus coaching for the last 16 years. He just loves to figure shit out. We're free to swear here, just so everybody knows. And he likes to get the most out of X and you don't mean the platform there, for the least amount of energy. And with the most fun and growth along the way. So again, you can find him at carlmassy.com, also ballycocreation.com, which is that a more recent website, by the way?
Yeah, that's a sort of a side thing. Carlmassy.com is the best place to find me.
Okay, that's great. And hello to Michelle. Nice to see you here at a stream. I feel like it's been a while. I sat down to do this, and I'm like, do I remember how to do this? Been away for a little while. I was traveling. Hello, Kevin Donnelly. And figure your stuff out. Yeah, he does sound like a wealth of experiences. Absolutely. So do you want to start, Carl, by sharing about yourself, how you came to be in this maybe location for one, and this way of life, and how you evolved from being an Army major into helping people to have better relationships and a whole variety of things?
It's an interesting conversation when you're introducing your sort of your timeline of things. Sometimes I like give the thumbnail version. That's like I was in the military for 14 years and then consulting to Olympic Games for 5 years and then traveling for a year and then coaching for 16 years or so. But I guess, and it's interesting, the topic too, relationships. So the first major inflection point for me was I was a captain in the army down in Tasmania, that little bit at the bottom of Australia, the state down there. And I was in my first long-term relationship, quite tumultuous type thing going on, and broke up, and it was just absolutely horrible, terrible. So I decided I wanted to get as far away as possible from this person. So I went across to the other side of the planet. I went to England and did a traveling, working through there for about 12 months. And one of the things from that experience that was most influential for me was the removal of myself from the known and familiar of the military beliefs and institutional impositions and that sort of stuff. And also the familial stuff. Even friends, like I got away and, I openly admit that I was a total homophobe when I was in the military, just carry on I was going to say pork chop, just absolutely stupid about the whole thing. But once I went overseas and I started mixing with people, I just realized I love people. I don't care whether they're black, brown, orange, purple. I don't care what their sexual orientation is, all of that stuff. I just like people. So that was the first thing for me to realize the idea about beliefs and about institutionalized stuff and biases and discernment and what do I really feel about this particular thing, not what my friends and whatever think. So that was a major turn point for me. So I came back from that. I came back to the military with the intention of finishing a degree, paying off any debts. And so I gave myself a 3-year timeline once I came back. And I found it absolutely fascinating. I've been a backpacker, scuzzy backpacker for a year, and then I come back and people are saluting me, calling me sir. It just seems so ludicrous. So there was a part of me that was not happy with who I was being, staying in the institution. And, I was looking in the mirror and I was wondering, why did I come back to this thing? So lacking the courage to deal with it, I was hitting the bottle pretty hard and that sort of stuff. And it was after a bender of a weekend, probably 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. This is back in the day, end of 1998. I've switched the television on and there's an infomercial there, Tony Robbins selling personal power too, and he's doing his big thing, his big teeth and whatever. And, I got caught up in this thing. So I've got the phone out, I'm dialing, talking to a real person. I've got a real credit card out, I'm reading numbers, doing that thing. So in 1999, I did one of his programs and it was a huge shift for me because it interrupted a few patterns I had going on. And I decided from that point to stop getting drunk. I got into yoga, changed my diet around. But one thing I realized just the other day was that was when I started reading nonfiction. And, that was a game changer for me. I was choosing my own information. I was letting this information come from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. So I reckon that was a major change point for me. And that was the point where I got into this personal development thing. So that was Easter 1999. That's when I started yoga. So I've gone down the path of the Eastern philosophies, Eastern teachings. And I guess what's brought me to Bali is, so I was consulting to the Doha Asian Games in Qatar, the Middle East and that sort of stuff, decided I needed to get the hell out of this security space. It's just rubbish. I was working for the organising committee in Athens for the Athens Olympic Games and realising I had zero respect for these people that I was working for, realised there was so much fear mongering about the need for our security services and all that sort of stuff that I just had to get out of this thing. And that's where I decided I wanted to get into coaching. I'm strategic about how I do things. So I was doing some studies as I was getting ready to transition out of it. So 2007, I did some NLP training. I did a Reiki Masters. I'd already done a personal training course, and then I moved to Bali with the intention of basing myself here to start this coaching thing. And that's where I've been since the end of 2007. This is where I write my books. This is where clients either come to me or I speak to them abroad and run some workshops and that sort of thing. So this is my location of residence until I find somewhere better.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I always think I'm going to make it to Bali, and I'm not sure how likely that is. I didn't think I'd ever go to New Mexico, and I was there last week, so or maybe the week before or something like that. Time flies. Yeah, you never know. Things could happen. And so, how did you wake up to all the agendas that were going on? Was that pre 2020, or did you?
I was in Athens, and when I was working there, I got extremely sick with pneumonia, and had a doctor give me antibiotics or whatever. But then I had problems around my lungs, and I went to see a doctor. And because I was working at a pretty high level in Athens, I had access to some pretty decent doctors. So I saw this doctor with about 15 letters after his name, a Greek doctor. And he sort of went through and he said, yeah, you've got pleurisy. It's an infection on the lining of your lungs. And when you breathe, that's going to hurt, and you cough, and all of that's going to hurt. And then he sat me down and he talked about lifestyle stuff for a good period of time. And he said, look, I can give you painkillers, but if you can take the pain in that, this thing will fizzle out over a couple of days. So you don't have to take the painkillers, totally up to you. And he was talking about eating right and that sort of stuff. I was like, holy bajolis. So from that point, I stopped taking pharmaceuticals. Since 2000, so that was 2004, I've seen a doctor end of 2007. I had an earache and I wanted them to use some technology to look in there to see if there's a problem. Okay, no problem there. Okay, I'm good. She's starting to write me a prescription. I'm like, no, I don't need a prescription. I just want to know whether anything's broken in there. So from this point, I've been off pharmaceuticals. I stopped reading newspapers and watching news probably 2000. So a long time ago. So, and then going down the spiritual path, starting to shift my perception on different things. But the thing for me, and with this whole 2020 onwards show, was when I was in the military, I studied defense against nuclear, biological, and chemical attacks and that sort of stuff. So I did an advanced course in that. It was a 3.5-week course. And part of the gig was you had to go into a gas chamber. They'd release some CS gas in there. You had to go in and do various drills in there where you'd put your mask on and clear your mask and all that sort of stuff. And if someone had told me, put this little cloth mask on, duck inside that gas chamber and you'll be fine, I was like, so the whole thing for me was I was looking at the data and that sort of stuff, and I've got a pretty open mind about things. So looking at the data and just realizing that people were being told ridiculously silly stuff. And I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, but, from a health perspective, it didn't make any sense that we weren't told to do different things to support our well-being and health. It was just all out of whack. So for me, that was, okay, something's going on here. So then let me just dig a little bit deeper and ask different questions of different people. So that was, and I think too, it's interesting, Beth, because I spent a lot of time understanding myself and, understanding psychology and neurobiology and lots of different things to support self moving forward. But I think it was me choosing at that time that I wanted to actually understand outside of, health of self and sort of go a bit planetary. So I actually, wound back my work to sort of 50%. I could still have, clients abroad and that sort of thing. But then I started going deeper and deeper and deeper. So, that's really, I think, expanded my full understanding. I went deeper on the V subject and that sort of thing, reading lots of books on that. And they supported what I'd started to build up all along. So it was, pretty easy to get to where I got to.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, so many people have it's taken them 2, 3, 4, 5 years to start noticing how things don't add up. I have a, friend who he yelled at me at the beginning when I started to speak out, and then later on he pretended he didn't do that, and he definitely didn't apologize or anything. But he said, like, it makes no sense. Everybody who's getting the V is also getting 6, so it must be totally a scam. And it was like,
Mm,
okay, well, go team. I'm glad you woke yourself up there.
mm. I
Yeah.
mean, one thing I think about, and I've been very interested to understand how I can raise my level of consciousness. It's sort of my North Star now for life purpose. How can I raise my level of consciousness? What can I do to lower my level of, what do I do to remove the things that lower my consciousness? I rarely drink, have one beer a year with my brother. That lowers my consciousness. So, what can I do to raise it? And I think one thing about having a high level of conscious awareness allows us to hold two differing thoughts in mind without having a meltdown.
Mm.
Like that ability to just sit things there. Like I can listen to conversations from different doctors that, you know, I like parts of, but they've differing views in different things. I can still sort of hold the space there of, conflicting ideas in my brain without not going crazy.
Yeah, that's a very good skill. It's actually something I'm super interested. I teach a process called marrying the opposites, and like even the nature of opposition. There's that word opposition, and I always point to maybe start to segue to the topic we're going to discuss today. If you ask somebody what's the opposite of masculine, they are going to say feminine.
Mm,
Right? And so right away, you've got a paradigm of opposition going on between those two, when in
mm,
reality, it couldn't be further from the truth. But
mm,
because
mm,
you have that experience, then it becomes real, and it is going to create and manifest in that spirit of opposition. So yeah, you just nailed it. Like if you can hold what seem to be opposing thoughts at the same time, then it's something remarkable is always revealed in that, and the tension is released. So good on
yeah.
you.
The other thought that came to mind then too is like if there's calcification of our beliefs. So, again, with this whole, consciousness being ebbs and flows and they're not being strictly this box and that box is, allowing our beliefs to change as new information becomes available. And we're like, oh, okay, I thought this, but, I just, without, the hanging on to it and, the attachment to that particular thing.
Exactly. All my favorite people are like that they have that ability to take on a new piece of information, even if it completely argued with everything else that you have been saying and promoting and writing about and everything like that.
Mm,
Not easy
mm,
to do. I don't know if you caught any of my streams with Dr. Garrett Smith, but he's a fast learner, fast grower. He outdates himself. I can totally relate to that in his information. But yeah, he's not willing to sit with, like, I know something different now, but I'm going to pretend I don't. Like, what's up with that?
mm,
Right? Like, how can you live
mm.
with yourself? So
I
yeah.
particularly, us, we've written books before, and you sort of, park that, like, to be able to say, like, I wrote a book, like, 10 years ago, and to say parts of that are crap, like, I would never teach that to someone now because I've learnt new things. I guess that's the evolutionary process, is we, learn new things. And my only caveat for that is I'm okay that some people enter, where they need to enter it. And maybe sometimes the conversation might be a little bit too far out there. So, progressively go. But yeah, it's interesting to say, no, what I said in that book, that's crap.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's never all crap. You're always like
Yeah.
evolving towards the truth. But yeah, yeah, no, I totally get it. Just a little bit about your experience in the army again, and like from what I understand, they tend to experiment pretty good on those guys, and multiple jabs and weirdness going on. So, do you feel like you got damaged by that?
Yeah, I reckon I counted one time, I was a pin cushion for about 24 different pins over the course of my time there. And I reckon the research I've done, maybe a bit of adult onset asthma, not a great extent and that sort of thing. And I also reflect back when I first joined the Army, I was at the Australian Defence Force Academy, and it was a tri-service, so there was Army, Navy, Air Force there. And one of my colleagues was in the Air Force, and he got, in the first 2 or 3 months, he got meningitis, and was out, and then they were sort of tracking all, who bumped into him and the whole virus thing, and I reflect back on it now, and I'm curious as to what might have been the root cause of that particular experience for him, because no one else around him who brushed up against him, and we were all living in barracks in close space and that sort of stuff, and I was the person that found him unconscious, and he'd sort of vomited and that sort of thing. So he was out of it and that sort of thing. I didn't catch anything. We all got inoculated with and as I reflect back on it now, I think there's a possibility that it could have been body's reaction to having a whole bunch of foreign bodies put in it, and particularly in the induction phase, and this is the early phase, you're just getting jabbed with everything. I mean, and it's a good business for the industry to have those government contracts where they know it's going to be recurring revenue for them and high volume. So yeah, pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite a market. Right. Yeah. Imagine if every soldier stood up and had a choice with that, like how many would actually enter into that experiment? Probably very, very few. This way they've got a captive audience.
Yeah, definitely.
For that product or those products. Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to say thanks to Michelle. She was singing the praises of my book, which I appreciate very much. And Carl did a lovely review of my book. And that was one of the ways that we connected. I'm going to try to find that link before the end of the stream today. But let's go on and talk about relationships, complex relationships in particular. There are many levels of relationship, especially with our internet days. And, you have a few emails and a few texts, maybe a conversation. I actually met one of my House of Free Will members and spent a whole week with them. We'd only ever worked together. And I just had an inkling. And then next thing you know, boom, I've got a ticket there. And it turned out to be like a really good intuition. We're like brother and sister, so much alike. And but I was aware of what a big leap that was from the online world to the in-person world. And yeah, it's not easy to navigate. I think personally, I think it's got harder, but I'm really interested in your opinion since 2020, or is that, was it already hard and we just became aware of what was already stacked against us? What's your take on that?
I mean, fascinating topic. And just to let everyone know, Beth presented me with this topic about, 12 or 18 hours ago, and 8 hours of that was me sleeping. So it was interesting when I saw the topic. I'm like, navigating complex relationships. What constitutes a complex relationship? My first thought was that all relationships are pretty complex because we can't read people's name, and no one has exactly the same blueprinted experience. So no one has the same values, the same measure of values, the same beliefs, the same anything. And I'm surprised that two people actually come together and can actually get along, given, the way they go, oh, let's see if we can get along. So my first and foremost thing is it's all pretty complex. The other thing I want to say was the thought that came to mind too. So I've written 6 books, and the first 3, I set myself a goal of writing 5 books in 10 years. It was going to be called the guidebook series. Well, it is actually called the guidebook series. Happiness, health, authentic success, relationships, and spirituality. I didn't even know what that was going to be or look like. I've got to finish the first 3 books, and I'm doing the outline, I'm reorganizing things for the relationship book, and I'm putting it all down. I'm like, you know what? 75% of this stuff I've already written about, and I don't want to write about it all over again. What I realize is, a huge part of the relationship thing is self-work. And, I want to, introduce the concept today of that. Like, I've, gone into relationships, and every time I go into a new relationship, I say, hey, babe, this is the best version of Carl Massy that you ever are likely to make. Because audit the absolute bejesus out of previous relationships to work out what I did good, bad, otherwise. And then I do the work on myself so that I can be a better expression of self in relationship. So, in answer to your question, Beth, like all relationships are complex, and depending on how close they are to our inner circle, the outer ones maybe where we might take things less personally, so that changes the emotional intensity of that particular experience. For me, and one of my primary teachings, and my don't do things harder, is I wanted like consciousness get into a place of calm, and it doesn't matter whether it's in any type of relationship situation. The more calm you are, the more centered, grounded consciousness, access to prefrontal cortex, full vision, not in a stress response, not in mammalian brain or reptilian brain or anything like that, the more likely you're going to have a better level of engagement with the person you're in relationship with. So I really have clients coming to me, want to work on having relationships in their life, and I always start on, let's work on self, and then you can become the top shelf version of yourself. So then you can get to interact, choose, and play at the top shelf level as far as relationships go. So that's a big one for me. I think relationships have been complex through entirety. I think our lives have become more complex, which means that we're a little bit more on a hamster wheel. So we've probably got less ability to be consciously aware of what's happening in this relationship with person, for me to be able to make the best choice of, where I take conversations, what I say or don't say. So I think in our rushy sort of world, it sort of means that we might rush into a conversation. For instance, if you have a tough conversation you need to have with someone, if you rush into that, you might be ill prepared for it. I call myself a strategist, and I don't like to wing things, and I don't like to wing even life. Like, I want to figure out probably 80% of it if I can, and just trust that there's 20% unknown I'm never going to figure out, sort of thing. But so I want to come into a tough conversation. I want to actually probably do a little bit of prep of understanding, what I want to get out of this particular conversation. And, the topic navigating, it's named complex relationships. If we use a maritime metaphor, we'd sometimes the navigation is just avoid that coral reef altogether. I'm not even going into that relationship or conversation, that relationship, or trying to meet halfway, or, any of that stuff. I'm just gonna go right around it.
Right. Well, it's fascinating. I feel like I've got a lot in common with that probably 100% of the time now, where there's some relationship issue of some kind, and you must notice it in your work, or I'm assuming that you would notice it in your work, that where your work goes deep, then the relationship tends to go deep too, and that doesn't necessarily always mean roses and the tiptoe through the tulips. That it's bringing people's very deep inner experiences up, and that may or may not be okay with them. They might not have expected that, and I think I do tend to bring that up even naturally, even if it weren't for this work. And so if a problem arises, then I'm going to attempt to do all of the work inside myself first. And it's just like you said, that sometimes you realize, oh, nothing needs to be done, and even nothing needs to be said, or you don't know, right? It's pretty open-ended. You might get to the other side of that work and go actually something totally needs to be said or done. And I got taken to task with something recently that came up. I got to the other side. I didn't get all the way to the other side of it, but I knew for a fact that something needed to be said. That I wasn't able to move forward as things were, and just went ahead and had that conversation. But with at least having dealt with the majority, or at least a great deal. I don't know if all of it, and it did have a good outcome. So I was pleased with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking one thing is like for us to work out, and this is my whole don't make life harder than it needs to be. There might be some relationships that we actually don't need. Like if there's, incoherence, like if it's out of resonance and that sort of stuff, we might need to step back and ask ourselves, do I really need to invest the energy that it's most likely to cost me in order to get this relationship? Like I find a lot of people, if they've had long-term past relationships, they assume that those relationships need to stay in their life and be forever in their life. So I'm very much, one of the philosophical practices or philosophies of Eastern teaching is non-attachment. So I like to practice non-attachment. Non-attachment is I'm not attached to the need to be in a relationship with someone because I've been in a relationship with them for 15 years. So there might be some friends and, we had this really nice thing going on for a bunch of time, but, then there's a divergent piece in the road and, I'm going a different direction and they're going a different direction to me. And like, that's okay to high five and say, see you later. So I might decide I don't need to try and make that person understand why I'm going this pathway and why my destination is this particular thing over here. Everyone has their own life path and reason for doing whatever, and it's, that's their job to do. So again, I'd like, if I decide that that's a worthy relationship that requires the work to make it work or whatever, then invest it with all the resources and everything I've got in my toolbox or learn along the way or other people's advice I get. But there's some relationships that we might be okay with, letting go and letting slip away. What's your thoughts on that, Beth?
Yeah, it's fascinating. There was a point where, and it definitely was inspired by the 2020 meltdown and, breakup of my family, me with my family. They didn't break up. I think they're still more or less good with each other, but reminds me, I do have to call my sister. Hilarious. And so I caught myself having this goal of grasping at long-term relationships, wanting them to last, wanting them to be, like there's something about a lifelong relationship that is just like amazing, right? So when my earliest childhood friend ended up just like creaming me on Facebook for something that I said, and it's just like, oh, like another one bites the dust. Here we go, and that's okay. And now she's back, like in amnesia or something, like she forgot that I was really a bad one. And it was at that time I actually had a coach helping me that I shifted my goal from like long-term relationships to just loving relationships, because that's what I can, and that I can control that from my side, that I participate in loving relationships. And that became like really freeing.
That's a beautiful thing and a beautiful distinction. I have a belief around goals. It might be weird for some people, but my belief is even intimate relationships, they last as long as they do. Like there's enough pressure in a relationship to make things work without putting pressure on how long and measuring how well we're doing according to time and all that sort of thing. So they last as long as they do. Actually, that reminded me of a childhood friendship from, the age of maybe 10 or 11. I had a best mate, went through school, primary school, what's the name, high school. We did martial arts together. We got our black belts together, like besties. He decided he wanted to join the Defence Force as a pilot. So he applied for the Australian Defence Force Academy. I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll apply as well. I got in and he didn't get in. And he had, I think it might have been colour blindness. So that sort of, he wasn't able to become a pilot and that's what he wanted to do. So I caught up with him after, my first leave and that sort of stuff. And, there was a bit of jealousy and that sort of going on. So, and I had my army thing. So I continued on down that way. And then with these social media things, I reconnected with him. He's into CrossFit, into the fitness stuff. I'm into the fitness stuff. So I caught up with him and I had my partner. My partner is Chinese Indonesian. super smart. We've been together 16 years. Ferry doesn't pull any punches. 5 foot tall, about 80 to 90 pounds. I don't know what so 39 kilograms. So we catch up with this guy, Matt, and we're chatting to him, and like we walk away from it, and Ferry says to me, she goes, he never asks you one thing about what you're doing, what you've done. Like, that guy's a dick. And, I was like, oh, it's interesting. I think I caught up with him one other time, and I thought, yeah, same thing again. He didn't ask me what I was doing. Like, it was just me. Like, I'm ready to let go of that. Like, I don't have to have that. We did so much together, and we were so tight as kids. But that's a phase, and that's okay to let that go.
Exactly. It's kind of a sign, hey, when they really they don't want to risk, what have you been doing, or how have you been doing, or how are you? All of those questions, if they're so loaded, then I think you don't have much of a relationship to build on there, personally.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that happens with relationships where there is the paradigm that it doesn't need to last forever, it's okay if things grow apart, is that people can very easily bail out of relationships. So how do you know when it's time to like dig in and do the work, and when it's time to cut bait?
Yeah. I work with a client, and I'd known this person for a while, so I knew his relationship and that sort of stuff. And I wasn't necessarily a fan of his partner, like a lot of blaming external things, not a lot of self accountability and that sort of stuff. But they had 2 kids together. So he came over to work with me in Bali, and we spent a week together. And, the intention was deep dive and do everything that he could possibly do to, bring this relationship back on course. So he went back and he, did everything he could do, like, to bring it back on course, but, still rocky wheels. And what he did was, he's a surfer. So he's gone out surfing, and while he was surfing, and he didn't want to break up because the kids were sort of late teens, whatever, and he was going to stay around for the family. But he had this epiphany when he was out in the surf in nature, in his most beautiful space and place. And that was, I need to break up. It's not healthy for me, for the kids, or anything here. And at that moment, it's like, just complete knowingness. It's, plugged into source. The angels are singing to say, that is the best decision ever. He leans back on the ground and then goes, how am I going to unfuck all this stuff that I've built up over the last whatever years, realizing that it's going to be really hard to disentangle. And it was really hard to disentangle. What I'd say to people is, if the choice is made and there is that aha moment, and it's bigger than you, and it's like really feel it coursing all through your body, it's in your heart, it's a divine piece of wisdom from your heart. If you go back and then realize it's really hard to do this, and that starts sending signals like, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing to do, you need to come back to the original message from heart, that wisdom that said, it's time to move on, and acknowledge that it's really hard to disentangle yourself from relationship. I've got a family member going through separation at the moment, and but the kids are a little bit older. One's still, at home, going through school and all that sort of stuff. That's when there's complex relationship stuff going on. That is hard work trying to manage. And it's something that, I haven't had personal experience with, so I know of it, but I, don't feel the heart-wrenchingness of it. So that's the challenge, I reckon, when we come into, our values clearly going in different directions in relationship. Just need to do all the work on self, peeling layers back. Am I biased? Am I seeing things? Like even doing a practice, like write down 3 things that you love and admire about this person, and do that for a couple of months and see whether that shifts the bias around, because maybe you're biased and hyperfixated on the things they did wrong, and that made you get to the point, well, no, I've got to leave this and that sort of stuff. So you don't learn and grow unless you, go through that sort of work at the tail end of a relationship. So what I say is, if you leave when it gets uncomfortable, you don't get the true life growth lesson out of it. Like life's encouraging you and giving you a beautiful scene to do, do the work in for you to actually have the pain of growth from that experience. So if we tend to walk away from things when they get too uncomfortable, then we just keep repeating that. We don't get to build that muscle up. I'm big on mental toughness and the ability to stay in that conversation, that tough, hard conversation. We need to do that in order for us to be even better in whatever's downstream for us, like next relationship, or whether that's an intimate, whether that's a familial, whether it's a work, whatever it is. This stuff is an opportunity to learn and grow, but we need to know when the time is to, push the eject button. When we start going from discomfort to serious pain, when we start having physical symptoms in our body, then that's time to have a more serious conversation about, okay, things need to change. Can they change within the current environment, or do I actually need to change and go in a different direction?
Right, right. Yeah, one of the things I've noticed about doing that self-work, which is a must, I don't think there's any way around it. You're going to meet it, right? Whether you meet it in this relationship or the next 7 in a row, it's going to be like the same theme coming up again. Fascinating that it's a huge risk. Say you're in a situation where you don't really, maybe you're, like you said, your values don't match. That would be the most painful, because there's a lot of things you can navigate around, but if you don't value things
Yep.
the same way, that's hard. And say in my relationship with my son's dad, I went to work intensely on myself, realizing it wasn't working when I worked on him. It just wasn't working.
Mm,
So
mm,
we'll leave that for now.
mm,
And so I did the inner work, and I had this illusion at the time, many years ago, that that was going to mend the relationship. But in reality, it did the opposite. It
mm,
made the divide much more stark, and the decision, it was almost like it made itself. Certain things happened,
mm,
and it wasn't even like I decided at that point, but the inner work seemed to decide. So I always tell people,
mm.
it's where I'll turn it over to
What?
you if you want to say something.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, like, I've seen in a lot of relationships where a particular person in the relationship has decided to get into the personal growth, and the other person in the relationship has decided not to, or chosen not to step into it. That's extremely challenging within a relationship, like when someone's starting, because once we start doing this work, we start actually changing our vibrational frequency. We sort of start showing up as a different frequency, which means it's a different match, which means we need to reorganize our frequency with the relationship frequency. So I've seen a lot of relationships prior to, crazy times where the relationship, someone's just outgrown the other person. We make our best choice. And, Tony Robbins, I do like his work because he's good with strategy. He says, 90%, 95% of the success of a relationship comes down to selection. We make a selection of who we think is going to be our partner in relationship with the best information we've got available. We absolutely need to work out whether aligned values, whether our goals pretty much go in the same direction. And if one wants to have kids and the other doesn't want to have kids, like, we need to figure this stuff out. But then, it's our best guess at the time. So we don't know, natural course of life, there might be some shifts and changes. But if there's a big global thing that sort of, shakes everything up so much, we don't necessarily know where they're going to go with that. And we certainly didn't know 10 years ago when we were selecting partners. Oh, I wonder how this partner will weather, this particular thing, when we're being told this and there's this over here and there's this. Talk about complex. I've got no clue how they're going to handle that thing. So we, bump into life and we get feedback from life, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't think they're the right, person to be on this journey with me. Like, it was pretty good when we were going to Barbados and sipping cocktails and whatever, walking down the streets of Prague. But like this other tough stuff, they're not the person. And then it's it's a realization of that. And again, we want to know that at our core. Then it's like, I'm always about how can we strategically do this in the best possible way to get the best possible result from it, as opposed to the whole winging show. So there might be better strategies as to how we navigate this parting of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Some relationships you have a lot of choice in, and others become much more entangled. And I remember the realization that I was going to be like, as long as my son was here, that I was going to be related to that man one way or
Mm,
another. Right?
mm.
Like that was like
Not a choice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know it sounds stupid even to have an awakening to that, but and
No,
mm, in a way,
no.
it's good because for the sake of just him and I, then it was a clear choice to part ways. But for the sake of my son, it's been very worth it to continue to work on that relationship, which really means working on myself because I don't have any
Mm,
consensus or agreement on the other side. And I have seen miracles, right? Where
mm,
things could have gotten completely out of control, gone litigious. I would have been in the right to go
mm,
call a lawyer or whatever. And, there were wrongs. But I just kept seeing through the eyes of a girlfriend who went through incredible amounts of litigation with an ex that used the legal system to abuse her. It was hellish to the tune of more than six figures that
mm,
luckily enough her parents had the deep pockets to fund all of that. And I just decided, you know what, that's not going to be me.
mm,
It,
mm, mm,
whatever it takes is not going to be me. And I have seen these kind of transformations before my eyes where I went inside myself and became less aggressive, but like, not pointing
mm.
my fingers, not wanting to kill him, not wanting to, that I know that sounds dramatic, but it's really
Yeah.
like programming
Mm,
instructs those
yeah.
kind of things. And then next thing you know, he turned around and acts more like my friend and is kind with me and generous with me and more open with me. And, things always have their way of people always end up more or less defaulting back where they came from. But I've been able to navigate what I call obligatory relationship, right? Whether that's with your
Mm.
child or a parent or someone where you get locked in, your karma kind of
Mm.
locked you in. Do you have anything more you want to share about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Complex relationships, everyone, and then there's the added level of family, like that you didn't actually choose to have that person as a uncle, auntie, cousin, brother, sister, mum, dad, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, like that does add an extra level of complexity and an extra level for us to do the work to see if we can find the most comfortable place in that relationship, and acknowledging that some of those family relationships again might end up like a little bit distant, fractured, or whatever. So again, we try and choose the ones that are most important for us to work on, and do our best with those. And when we've done our best, like that's all we can do. Like, we do our best and then we surrender it to life. And it might unfold in different ways, and it might be several years down the track that it reorganizes itself in a different way. It just needed this spaciousness for someone to settle into things, to understand what's important for them and not important for them. But yeah, I think the challenge is the family stuff. Over the silly period, like my sister was a little bit slow, but she sort of was pretty aligned with me. Brother sort of understood a bit of it, but his home camp were in a different direction and that sort of stuff. So like, there's a bit of that. My parents, they're just a generation that just go along and believe people in white jackets. And I give them my opinion, and then I say, up to you to choose how you want to experience this thing. So I think from a spiritual perspective, I sort of allow everyone to walk their own path and that sort of stuff, and do my best to encourage them. And I'm not attached to if someone wants to make a bad choice and check out early or go through pain or whatever, like then that is their choice. I'll support them as best as I can. I don't necessarily agree with it, but yeah, those ones, the locked in ones, the family stuff,
Yeah.
interesting, and that's where I'm empathetic for a lot of people that went through serious challenges with their family. One thing about humans is we're pretty good at adapting. So it might be that there was a really uncomfortable couple of years, maybe 2.5 years. Maybe things have like got a little bit more settled, or maybe there's an agreement to disagree and let's not even talk about that subject. Like in the old days, we went through the military college, taught etiquette, and you're told, not to talk about politics and sex. So, like just two topics, like aren't laid on the table. I don't know that we necessarily follow that, but that's the idea it might be. I talked with an army colleague of mine, and here's an interesting thing. Like a lot of the army guys who went through, some of them got to brigadiers and generals and all that sort of stuff. A lot of them have just transitioned straight into the military industrial complex, which is not in my wheelhouse. Like that is just a complete rot. So, I'm like, I catch up with these guys, and I've been through some, serious experiences with them, some serious challenges. So the depth of relationship when you're going through hardship and that sort of stuff, when you're hungry and tired and all the rest of it. Like, so you got some good. So that's been probably one of my biggest challenges, more so than and family stuff, is, the colleagues of mine through the military. And I don't even know whether some of them might listen to this conversation. Most of them probably wouldn't listen to it because, again, being in an institution, like, information is generally from top down. I actually think, over the course of the last few years, the people that fared well in understanding what was going on was the entrepreneurs who have had to, in their own business, figure stuff out, and they try stuff and see whether it works, and they value real world feedback. Someone tells them, oh, this is a great marketing plan, do this, and you do it, and like, oh, no, that actually doesn't work in the real world. So a little bit more skeptical about someone giving them the big sell. Someone sells them this product, or this product is going to, save you from this and that. Like, let me just back up on that one a bit and understand whether there's anything else going here. So I see that, challenge with my colleagues who have been in the system and they've, been conditioned in that. It's a little bit harder for them to think outside of the box. So if we do catch up, and I've got a mate living over in Montreal, a couple of years older than me, military guy, ex-SAS and that sort of stuff, different views around the V show, and, he was on board with that. He's still in the security consulting space and working with government agencies and all that sort of stuff. So when we catch up, and we've had, 35 years of history, like, we chat about stuff where there is alignment in our relationships, where he doesn't have children the same as me, so we can talk about that. Both of us have left Australia, so we talk about whether he'd ever move back to Australia, and what do you think is wrong with Australia if we're bitching about Australia, whatever. So there's commonality. He'd had an accident falling off a ladder. And so we're, chatting about the amount of men as they get a little bit older that have accidents falling off ladders. And, so there's definitely commonality there. And it might be that you just acknowledge, hey, in this relationship, I'm not even bothered having that conversation. We've brushed up against it and, worked out each other's views. We've got enough history and that sort of stuff that we can actually sit with it and be okay with. One of us thinks the other's making a stupid choice and the other thinks the other's making a stupid choice. So we can both think each other is stupid for some of our choices. But, overall, we're willing to meet in the places, where we are in alignment, where we can have good and even deep conversations.
Yeah, well, that's a really good thing. I want to just go back a little bit. I want to make some points about that too, but I don't want to go too far with it. That, where it comes to that realization, okay, that the values aren't a match anymore, or I've grown and I'm going in a different direction. And that does work on the interpersonal level where it's between two people and
Mm,
you simply part ways. And but do you think that society is going to survive that on the whole? That our controllers have gone through incredible lengths to destroy the family, and that's not new in
mm,
2020. That goes back
mm,
pretty much to
mm,
my birth, and
mm,
how feminism was on the rise, and the devaluing yourself if you were like just a housewife. How many times have you, oh,
mm.
you're just a housewife, and and so like how do you see where do you see relationships going, and is there at some point that we start to try to take greater responsibility for our society surviving?
Yeah, I guess there's things I think on a practical level and things probably on a more spiritual level, and there's spiritual evolution to bring these energies together in harmony, and that takes this energy up. So at a spiritual level, I think that's where we've always been going as a society, is to get to that place where there is a bit of acknowledgement of oneness. And I don't even know that's a word, but I don't know exactly what I mean, even when I say that myself. On a practical level, I've sort of thought that there's, going to be sort of societies that, drift in different directions. There might be people that love the 15-minute cities and, all of that encompasses, that concept. And then there might be people that just move in different directions. And, I'm here in Bali and we've, moved off the grid a bit. We've got a little bit of land here. We're farming our own stuff. I'm in a tiny house while we build our main house. We've now got our own, bore water, so we're not dependent on someone for water. I can go many days without eating, but, the water thing. So, I want to control as much of those things as I can, just because I like to, take care of as much as I can at my level, and then other stuff will take care of itself. I think relationships in general will end up leaning into the people that resonate with us more, and there may become, I think there's going to be clearly this side, and some in the middle that duck into the 15-minute cities to do some stuff, and then love going into the countryside to like have that nature experience and that connection with God and source and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it'll be like, my senses will be a little bit fractured, and will it come back into this emergence of something that's a little bit more spiritual in nature and beyond the physical, beliefs and systems and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, we've got our work cut out for us. Like you said, it's been going on probably hundreds, thousands of years, like conditioning us, the Industrial Revolution, getting us into the comfort of sitting in classrooms and being turned into products to go in. And I was even reading a book on time where, time is now a thing, where several hundred years ago it was not a thing. You just, got up when the sun came up, you did your work, you didn't worry about wasting time or should I be doing more things and all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting, our relationship with time as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be, and I think we might find for ourselves path of least resistance for now, but I would love to see the possibility of something that's even greater than what we've imagined in our minds as the ideal life and lifestyle experience and that sort of stuff. I might teach that stuff, but I do believe at a spiritual level there's something beyond, what we can create in the 3D physical space as well.
Nice. I really like that. Yeah, it can seem like the only direction you could go would be, back, but you can't go back. There's no back there. And it wasn't perfect either by any stretch of the imagination, that how many people stayed in relationships that weren't healthy for them in any way. And, Michelle was just pointing out like the whole like, hormonal thing, what's been done to us to muck with the
Mm,
boys and the girls, and
mm, mm.
women on birth control, and endless things that have served to really smash the life force and the liver. I've been like really
Mm,
looking into that organ
mm.
lately, and yeah, so we like you
It's
said,
sort
we
of
have
a bit fractured like that, taking out of alignment. So, different forces, whatever they be, may disrupt our ability for that, life force to, move clearly up our spine. So our work is, how can I, navigate my way to bring as much alignment into myself as possible? Then I might bring alignment into my relationship as much as possible. Those things that are clearly out of alignment, I might loosen my attention to those. There might be relationships I sort of spend less time in. There might be relationships I say, okay, I can have this relationship and we'll talk about these things. So I think there's external forces that are disrupting that. So I think that's even more important for us to do the work on the things that allow this energy to flow freely. I was thinking of this as a topic for a future book on alignment. So all of the different parts that we might work on to bring greater alignment so that source energy can move more freely through us. So I think for me, there's the people that align with source energy, with God, and get the concept of creative intelligence, energy and that sort of stuff. And then there's the ones that, we're smarter, we're humans, we're smarter than everything. Like, I think that's a bit of a fracture point as well. So I think the two camps, the 15-minute city camps might be more into look at what we've created and how good are we in that. Let's tinker with things and let's do genetic modifications over here and let's do all this sort of stuff. And then, the other camp might be more about, let me, I'm 55 and I want to get more in the land. I want to, jam my fingers in the soil. I want to walk around barefoot and I want to reconnect at a deeper level, with source, with energy, with God, with, that's, my spiritual evolution. So I choose, that's an important relationship for me. So I want to have awesome relationship with my complex self. I want to have awesome relationship with, that thing that's greater than me. And I've got most control over those, rather than controlling and influencing other people. So I can take care of these things. So I work on those. I was thinking of relationship strategies like Gary Chapman's 5 love languages and that sort of thing. And, he talks about in the early stage of a relationship, when we're in the honeymoon phase, there's less likely to be issues. Nothing bothers us too much. Those little things that someone does, they don't annoy us. Like, they're just little foibles and that sort of thing. So he sort of suggests that when our love tank is, pretty full, all that little stuff doesn't really matter when our love tank is like getting empty. So obviously he talks about strategies in relationship to increase our love tank by explaining to our partner how we wish to receive love from them, expressed from them, and that sort of stuff. But the thing for me is so I can control to some extent the love within my love tank by working on my own building up of that love and my love with, source, with God, with creator, that can fill my love tank up, so I can be at 80%, and then it's relationship that brings that extra, 20% on top. So it's this idea of self-sustainability, again, circling back to what we spoke about at the start, is if I come in all loved up, I'm less bothered and I'm less likely to take it personally that someone's got a very different view from me, which is 180 degrees different, and which I think is absolutely balmy. It doesn't make any sense. You'd have to be a lunatic to believe that. This is, the more oneness, the higher we get into those levels of consciousness where we are love, and okay, that doesn't bother me so much. I can be okay with that. I don't want to hang out with that, but I'm okay with that. That sort of moves, around me without sort of getting attached and without triggering any reactive response.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's one of the big mistakes of relationship, that you suddenly, maybe you go from a single person to being in a relationship, and then all of a sudden you think that that person is the source of all the love. And it's like, well, or safety, or all of the things that, that can be very big for women, I know. And then I just had a rational moment about oh, well, before I was in this relationship, where did I go for that love and safety and all this, and so yeah, yeah, I think it's a cliche, but what you bring to the relationship is more important than what you're trying to get out of it.
Mm,
Do you
mm.
think that's accurate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you go into a relationship and thinking that your partner's going to provide you with happiness and that sort of stuff, like you're behind the eight ball from the start. It's like something external to you deciding your level of happiness and that sort of stuff. That's not a good game to be involved in. It's like, no, I would like to have the hand on this dial as opposed to, yeah, here's the dial. Can you just, and man, and my partner, she has hormonal things going on each month and that sort of stuff. And like, I seriously don't want her to be controlling that dial, when she's got the shits with me. I'm like, okay, I'm okay to just let you be with that experience, and I'll just love you, and I won't take that personally. And that's my work. My work is to maintain my equanimity, whatever's happening in that relationship and around that relationship, from whatever forces create that experience.
Nice. Nice. I like that. One of the things that happened in 2020 with relationships was there was a lot more crisis and trauma bonding going on, right? Because people were freaking out, and they might have been the 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 50 people in their life, or even less, that was maybe willing to speak out or was seeing things earlier on. And it's very isolating. So I noticed a lot of people like just did this kind of like, oh, you don't believe in the boogeyman virus either? Oh, we're best friends now.
Mm.
And but those relationships, what do you think about those trauma bonds? Same with you in the
I,
military, right?
I've never given that any thought, and now that you bring it to mind and that sort of stuff, it's an interesting phenomenon. Again, it's like, these values are aligned, so they come together. But have we looked at, a holistic approach to this relationship? Like, so I could see once crisis passes, like they're no longer, and I could see that, like, there's different stages we might be going through in life where we need a particular level of support for it. So that person is very close once you've got past it. Maybe someone's breaking addiction or something like that, so they need a particular thing to get through that crisis. But that might be a different thing they need 5 years, 10 years down the track. So yeah, that's fascinating. I'd never thought of it. I'd never heard the terminology until you'd said it. But it makes a whole lot of sense. And it'd be interesting to see how those relationships go again. But again, it's that stepping back and seeing, is this still serving us? Is 1 + 1 = 3? Like, are we making each other better people for it? Like, are we adding energy to the field? Or, in this relationship, are we pulling energy from the field? So it's like, just rather than something lasts forever, is this still, serving both of us with what we most desired? We had this crisis experience, we came together for it. Is it still serving us moving forward? And then the grown-up conversation about, crisis has passed. Maybe you wander off that way and I'll wander off that way, and maybe we'll meet up again for the next crisis or something like that. Yeah, fascinating. Thanks for bringing that up, Beth. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, no worries. And what I've noticed also, where there's true trauma bonding, people coming together over that there tends to be a contract in that relationship that you don't heal from that trauma.
Mm.
You don't move past it, because that is the foundation of the relationship, and then that becomes a threat, especially if the other person is not interested in true healing.
Mm.
So
And I think if there's hyperfixation on the trauma, then that sort of can retard the healing process as well. So the more we focus on that thing, then, that can bring more of that thing into our being, when there's more to life than the trauma. And this is, one of the interesting things over the last bunch of years, is trying to extract your attention from the trauma and sort of look over at the sunset and look at all the beauty around you and sit in nature and go, nature doesn't give a shit about this whole show. Like, not one iota. There's not one plant that was bothered over the last few years by anything. Like, so, stepping back from the go, there's so much more that's not caught up in this little human spinning of wheels. We're the little speck in the earth, the cosmos, or, whatever we believe about that particular thing as well. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. Um, I loved what you said about entrepreneurs over, being. I have an obvious bias towards entrepreneurs. I've supported them.
Mm,
I was raised by them. Been one myself for I don't know, 25 years, and there is a lot more freedom in that. Like when I think about selecting a partner, for example, it's like I don't know if I would turn someone down that didn't have, but it's a matter of freedom. It's a matter of being able to make choices, especially when things are changing a lot in the environment, and then you have the ability to pivot and just pick up your life and go to Bali, or
mm,
to do all of those kind of things that are more within your scope when you don't have someone hanging over you. So anyway, I just wanted to throw
mm,
that
mm.
comment in there. And one of the things about relationships that I this is personal, but I will hazard to guess that people want nothing more in life than to be themselves. To me, that's like the biggest desire. And then to find those people that you could genuinely be yourself with, it's not that easy.
Yeah. And then there's the complexity of even that subject, you know, in its what's self? Am I being self, or am I conditioned by this? So what's the expression of me in this? So I think, yeah, like I think that's all our calling is to, I believe our purpose in life is to be the biggest, fullest expression of our unique self in a way that serves others and serves the greater good. So our purpose is about that. I've got a client tomorrow, and I ask a bucket load of questions before I work with new clients. And he's talking about finding himself. And so that comes in the conversation. But for me, even the finding, like it's sort of looking, I'm like creating self from within. Like, so this whole thing about, I think that is the purpose of it, to be fully expressed, so we don't have to filter ourselves. Like, we filter ourselves with inappropriateness, but we can be ourselves, and we can have our own views and opinions, and we can show up, and if we're a bit rough around the edges, we can be a bit rough around the edges, and we want to be accepted for who we are. And rarely are we accepted as who we are from a very early age. Like, we're doing something that our parents don't like, and they don't accept that behavior, so they want us to change behavior. So that conditions us to be a particular person. Then we come into our adulthood and we're conditioned to be this, and then we realize I don't actually want to be this. Like, that was me, military. That was you with your transitions as well. I don't really want to do this. I don't want to walk on the straight path. And in a particular way that someone tells me, I want to walk across the grass and do different things. So life is figuring out this, and I do think it is a key piece. And I think taught in the past that relationships allow us to fast track some of the work on self, because it's reflected back to us, and there's a lot of emotional energy with it. So we probably get things quicker in relationship, because we can go along by ourselves, not in relationship, and life can be pretty cruisy and that stuff. And I think there can be growth, and we can choose to go into retreats and do our meditations and work, and there can be growth. But throw someone into a relationship, and whoa, does it fast track the shadows and the bits and pieces, and what habits have I got that aren't actually serving me? And so yeah, interesting one, self.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think that authenticity is both our deepest desire and our biggest fear at the same time. And
Yeah.
like you said, there's so many causes for us to develop personas as we go along. So we appear to be the right kind of person that's going to fit in and stay safe in the tribe and all of that kind of thing.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
not many people will really risk being their, actual self.
Yeah. Like, I was just talking to an English guy that's fully immersed himself in a Balinese village for a long time now. So he speaks Balinese, he's accepted into it and that sort of thing. And he said for the Balinese, their hugest fear is being excommunicated from the community. Like, scary fear where they'll just go along and conform and so you've got complex relationships, and then you've got cultural influences that can be built up over time that for me, that can retard the consciousness, the evolution of consciousness as well. That David Hawkins talks about levels of consciousness and that sort of stuff, talks about that pride where we're more concerned about other people, and the step above that is courage, and it's the courage to actually be ourselves, express ourselves.
Exactly. Oh, darn. We might have a little connection problem. If you can still hear me, Carl, you cut out. That was going really well. And let's see what Michelle is saying here.
I can still
Oh,
hear
there you
you
are.
through that
You can
whole
still hear
cutout
me?
as well.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I can hear you again if you want to finish your thought.
I can't remember where I was going. So back to you.
Yeah, that's okay. I think that point is made. Yeah, I've made a video for the House of Free Will today about the there's one of the complex programs, or I call it composite programs, that we tend to deal with is the instruction that comes from without, that basically we should hate ourselves, whether that's because we are doing wrongs to the earth and the earth is going to die because of us, or we're not. The programs can come from a lot of different places, but that basic instruction that you should hate yourself, I know that I definitely adopted that one early on. And then looking at that, people have gone to maybe the new age side and saying like, oh, you can't love people if you don't love yourself, and you have to love yourself, and you just have to love yourself, that all of this kind of things. And I did a deep dive in that, and to me, I found in this program that instructs you to hate yourself, the very same exact program instructs you to love yourself. And so what we're, to me, looking for is love that has no opposite, because especially in romantic relationships, I doubt there's a single person out there that wouldn't be familiar with this, having like incredible love for someone, and then they turn around and they have also incredible hate for them, huge aversion, never want to see them again, like, get out of my life, never call me again, all of this kind of thing. And so this it becomes just a pendulum on the same spectrum and the same program. What do you tell people? Like, are for example, are you friends with people that you have been in relationship with in the past?
Rarely. Not something that I haven't done well. Like, I see my brother, and he's been good at doing that, having good friendships with past partners. Because I practice this non-attachment, I don't spend much time. Like, I look at my past and I work out everything that I can from it, and then I let it go. It goes into the recycle bin. So I just, that was a phase for me in relationship with that particular person. I don't have any need to feel, and if I feel I've made a decision that we're going in different directions, like, I'll be civil, obviously, if I bump into someone and chat, and I won't hate, because that's not so useful emotion. But it's not something that I've, been good at or made a point of, and I'm not attached to that. So.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I did, at one point I decided that there's no breakups, because to me relationships seem to just evolve. And I've always had to eat my words, where if I say, oh, I'm never going to talk to you again, and then somehow you heal and you forget, and the past becomes a softer, less prickly thing, and then you feel warm because you got together with a person for some reasons. Right? Maybe the values did grow in a different direction. But I think of my son's dad. We had a child together, right? We had a child. It wasn't superficial. It wasn't anything. So I tend to see it, but it's more of an evolution. And I have managed to be friends with the people that I've gone out with in the past and have romantic interests, but there's like, love has endured.
I think what I was writing down in my notes there, like, I didn't finish writing that note there. Trying to think of where I was going with my thoughts there, but I got distracted with things there.
No worries. I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything, but
I'm trying to think where you were talking about in those relationships going.
the love-hate thing, the love yourself, you just have to love yourself, or you can't love another until you love yourself.
Mm, mm,
Is it
mm.
that stuff?
I think all I was going to say was that I have no attachment to how things are going to work out in the future. Like I, that's what it was. I was going to talk about it. I don't talk in absolutes, like saying this must be, or this should be, or this has to be. Or so I'm very loose, actually, in my practical language as well. I say, oh, it could be this, or my hypothesis as of this date, which may change in 18 months' time, is this. So I think if we use a little bit of movement and room, even in our communication, that sort of stuff, even what we think the future needs to look like. So someone might say, I've been in relationship with Ferry for a bit over 16 and a half years now, and someone could say, are you in it forever? I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm in it until we decide we're not that good for each other, and we like decide to go in different directions. So I don't know if a relationship that's in could cycle back 10 years time and you have like a really good friendship because you come together on different topics or different things. So I guess that was the point I was trying to make, was not attached to how this thing is going to unfold. I have no clue. I do my best guesses, and I'd say I'm very strategic. So I like, work out what resources I've got around me. I take everything from assumption and get it close to fact as possible. Then I make my best guess, and then I put that into play, and then I wait for feedback, and that feedback causes me to adjust. Oh, I thought this was going to be a nice relationship, but no, it's not so nice. Whether that's a business relationship. I've had a couple of disasters in that space where you think, oh, this is awesome. I often say that business partnerships come together more quickly than intimate because, someone goes, oh, yeah, you're good at this and I'm good at this, and together we're great and we can pool our money together. I see so many business partnerships start very quickly where they haven't done the discernment filtration that might happen in an intimate relationship, and then they get invested in it, and money is an high emotional trigger. So, then they're in business partnership. I've seen it lots of other people. I've also seen it on myself, where you think, this is right, and you form something great together. But, 5 years, like I was in a yoga business, 2 other business partners, great for a number of years, but then decided they're out of alignment with my value of leadership. So I would lead this very differently. So I either change my value, that's not going to happen. I modify my value. I didn't really want to do that. Okay, then it's time for me to step out of this. So I consciously decided to step out. How can I make the transition as easy as possible? And then move on from there.
Right. Yeah. That's well said. It's easier to jump into, or I don't know, a lot of people do relationships super spontaneous, like, oh yeah, no desire for this, and I just met somebody, and the next thing you know, we're married, and so yeah, people can make some very
My challenge with the relationships is a lot of people don't have the tough conversations before they sign the contract, whether it's marriage or deeper relationship and that sort of thing. So people get themselves in a pickle 10 years downstream because they realize they didn't have that conversation 10 years ago to really know, where someone wanted to live for the rest of their life, how they wanted to do life, what lifestyle they wanted, whether they wanted kids or didn't want kids, whether they wanted 1 kid or 2 kids or 3, or how they were going to bring their kids up. So a lot of, I work with people that have not had those conversations before, and then they're getting to the point of crisis where they're trying to disentangle things, not because something in that moment is particularly bad, because they didn't do their homework way back by avoiding the discomfort of a tough conversation. So I think we've got a little bit, we as in humanity is probably a little bit softer, a little bit less interested in discomfort or leaning into discomfort or tolerance of discomfort. So that means the choices might be made when there's a bit of discomfort to go in relationship or out of relationship, and it might not be the full story. So, this idea of clients come and make their decisions based on their emotions. I'm like, that's one of our tools to give us some information, but there's other things to use in this decision making than emotions. If your emotion says, oh, this doesn't feel good, so I'm going to do something else, then you just continue to flitter. It's like, this doesn't feel good, let me lean into it a little bit more to see and sense and experience what's really going on, and then take it from there.
Yeah, we ended up really split up, and fascinating how the spiritual world would teach you not to think and not to use logic and not to, use that faculty along with your felt
Mm,
senses. So yeah, how
mm,
convenient is that? I was just you're mentioning finances and how incredibly mucked up that can make relationships. And we try our best. We're here in slave society. We all have to have money in order to survive. We're the only animal on earth
mm,
that has to have finances to survive. And it's pretty hard to make clean decisions based on that when it comes to it's so easy to have money go to the front of the values list that and that's very, I think, the case in a
mm.
romantic relationship or a business relationship too,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
always in our face. And what was the statistic? I don't know if you would correct me, but it was like 1 in 5 marriages fail over money. Over
I wouldn't have the statistic, but that sounds about right. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Yeah, yeah. So it's such a big thing. So in the face of slavery, how would you recommend people navigate
I
their finances?
what's the book, like Your Money or Your Life by, is it Robbins? I don't know whether Robin is her first name or her last name. But it's a great book, and it's like looking at the idea of enough and then some when it comes to finances. One of the things from a very practical perspective that, I did was like, how can I reduce expenses? So if I reduce expenses, then I need to make less money. If I need to make less money, that might give me more space to do other things that I want to do. That might give me more space to be more deeply in relationship. That might give me space to do different things. So I think it's a really smart thing to educate ourselves on this thing called money. I've had clients come to me. I had a client, she was telling me about this dark cloud following around, and that maybe she's got some bad karma debts and her friends would support that story and all that sort of stuff. And I talked to her, and it turns out she got an inheritance. Her husband had a newly formed financial investment company. He invested the money and lost it all. And her thing is, bad karma. I'm like, have you ever read a book on money? Have you ever had a conversation? Like, she grew up in a day and age where, they weren't involved in conversations about money at the dinner table. So, the reason that you have this experience isn't because there's a karmic debt and there's a black cloud over you. It's educating yourself in this particular thing. So I think from a practical perspective, all of us, we need to get better at that, particularly when we're being hammered by advertising to turn us into crazy consumers, consuming a whole lot of stuff that we don't need. So there's another, program in amongst all the other programs that causes us to stay on the hamster wheel because we're overspending and we've got easy access to debt, all of that sort of stuff. So this is where we need to constantly pop ourselves up out of it and go, do I really need that? And one of the great things for me, right, we've scaled down from a 2-story house to a tiny house. It's 3 meters by 10 meters, and this was the temporary while we build a new thing. But then when you're in a small thing, you go, what actually else do we need to, have a fully functional, enjoyable life experience? And the only thing that came up was a separate office for me because I talk loud, and it was my partner Barney. So it was like, I need to step off the hamster wheel to get really clear about what was most important to us. Like, I find we need a whole lot less money than we think we need to do things. Obviously, there's different countries, like Australia is extremely expensive, crazy expensive. So, we might choose to live in different places. We can manage money in different ways. Again, that's another strategic way you can go about capitalizing on that. If there's financial issues within relationship, it's like getting that out into the open, and not only the the practicalities of the spreadsheet of what's going on, but all of the emotional stuff to go with that. And it might be that someone needs the right support to help them work through that. So with any of this stuff, it's catching it at an earlier stage before it spirals out of control. Like with stress, it's like deal with it when it's a 7 out of 10. Like don't deal with it when it's in crisis mode. And this is, leading up to, crazy times, 2020 onwards. I would do a lot of work on myself. So I wasn't bothered, when this thing kicked in. I wasn't fearful or anything like that because I'd done all this maintenance work along the way. So I think, again, that's this work on self so that we can be in relationship when a crisis does happen, whether that's a health crisis, whether that's a family crisis, whether that's, some external crisis or whatever. We're more able to, be in that and work through it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. Finances is a huge thing in relationship. And if anyone isn't, working on their financial literacy, they need to, otherwise they'll be just getting led along by some nefarious players to get into more debt, to consume more things, and then to be in slavery to a greater extent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the evolutions that I've noticed happens in relationships is that because of the entanglement and the threat of the legalities on the other side of financial enmeshment, couples maintain their autonomy financially. And actually, my grandparents did that. And I thought it was so odd that my grandma had her own money and my grandpa had his own money, and it was weird. There was a certain, I think, one of the things that ends up setting up in the relationship between men and women is competition. I don't think that was the case for my grandparents, but that they're not really working towards a common goal. They're not pooling resources. They're not risking that entanglement, and then they're ultimately working against each other. Well, who spends more time, if depending on if you're living together, who spends more time looking after the home so the other one can make more money, and like just these really artificial, awful things that would never be relevant in any way.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, the thing that came up is like I don't think there's any one set way that works best for all people. So it's finding your own thing. In my relationship, we do have separate things, and we pool our money when we're, buying land or house or whatever. So this open conversation about the resources that we do have. So it's not hiding. And again, we're not in competition with each other. There's acknowledgement of the parts that we do more. Like I'm in a foreign country, Ferry speaks the lingo, so she deals with all of that stuff, and I know that can be quite challenging. So I have my place and role in it. Again, I think it's this idea of, open and honest communication about stuff like this. And again, open and honest communication through all stages of the relationship. So like, regularly catching up, okay, where are we at with finances? What are we saving for? Do we need to save? If there's something to save, we might pool our resources, put it in something together. But I believe in a very fluid thing. Like this isn't right or this is right. It's like, what works best for us and what works best for us now. This worked best for us for the first 5 years of our relationship. It doesn't work best for us now. So, I'm always about bringing conscious awareness into whatever experience is going on and saying, is there something that needs to be improved, changed? And then we talk about that calcification of beliefs. It's like, is there new information? Like, is the monetary system, a financial system, investment opportunities, is gold and silver better than this? What do you know about cryptos and all of that sort of stuff? So I think we need to stay in conversation about it and educate ourselves as best as we can.
Indeed. And so do you coach with couples, for example? Do you ever have two people come to you to try to work out their relationship problems?
I've had a few of them over time. I would say the majority I work on is individuals to become the best that they can be, and knowing that will spill over into relationships. A an individual one-on-one coaching session with a partner. So I might work with either person in that relationship, and then they might be the principal person that comes and talks with me. We do all the work we can, and then I might have a conversation with partner to understand, where there might be gaps and that sort of stuff. And ideally I want to create harmony in the household. I might even go into someone's house and, ruffle through their cupboards and see what food they're eating, and looking at all the different things that contribute to our wellness and well-being. I just did a corporate wellness piece for a new startup mining company, and they've got some pretty big goals and that sort of stuff to achieve. And the CEO is a colleague of mine from the military, and realised, we can burn out with this high thing. So work with them on energy. If we don't have the energy, if I don't have the energy here, I can't be in this relationship at the right level. So if my energy is low, I'm going to have a different relationship experience than if my energy is high. So it comes down to, I even say before having a tough conversation, drink some water, take care of dehydration. If you need to snack on something. If you need to get some fresh air, step outside and get some fresh air. Don't step into a tough conversation, an important conversation with consequences, without making sure you've taken care of the physical basics. I wrote a book on decision making, and that was the biggest thing that came out of it, was in order to make good decisions, make sure you're in the right physical and emotional state to make a decision at the level you need to make it, based on the level of consequence of that decision. So again, in relationship, we call a timeout if we're not ready for that conversation, and we don't take this personally. This isn't me telling my partner I don't want to speak to you because we've had an agreement about this. This means I need some time to sort my shit out before we come into this conversation, because I think you're going to be throwing a few kidney punches and a few uppercuts into me. Let me just get myself, organised, worked out before I step into it. So that's why I think we can, just simple things in relationship, I need to make sure my energy's up when I'm doing this, because anything I do where my energy's up is going to be better than if my energy's down.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Great advice. Yeah. So if you'd like, do you want to share with people how they could reach out and work with you and get your
book? If you've got any questions, I like actually getting asked questions, so don't hesitate to reach out. You can send me an email, carl@carlmassy.com, or if you go onto carlmassy.com, go to the contacts and you can get in touch with me there. So ask questions. If I think a question that requires an answer that's bigger than me tapping out a little response there, I might say, if you want to take this conversation deeper, let's catch up for a session, that sort of stuff. This is my latest book, 18 Ways We Make Life Way Harder Than It Needs to Be. Super practical and that sort of thing. I think on Kindle still, it's probably at Amazon, probably $1 for the Kindle version. And I think it's about $4. And if you get this, it tells you at the front how to download the audio book as well. So
nice.
That's really useful and really practical. And again, if we do one thing harder, it's not a problem. But if we have 4 or 5 things stacked up, then life starts getting much harder. We start leaking energy. Then our energy's down here. Then we're trying to have that tough conversation. It's not going to work. I write a weekly newsletter, which is super practical. So that's probably the best way to get a sense of what I'm on about before you spend your $1 or your $5 or whatever. Go onto that, sign up. I think you get here's me knowing my back end of stuff. You get a free audio book of my first book, the Guidebook to Happiness. So you can tune into that, listen into that one. And again, that'll give you a bit more of a sense. But then, just my weekly newsletters, super practical. And if you've got a question that I think, hey, I could put that into a newsletter response, then I can go down deeper there as well. So that would be the best for me.
Nice. I love it. And then I'm the first hand knowing that you write in full sentences and paragraphs, long form letters, which are very enjoyable. And you probably got the 2-word answers for me at times just because I'm going fast. So at some points. And by the way, I found that article that you wrote reviewing my book. So I'm going to share that in the chat here if anybody wants to click on that. Yeah, I really.
I reached out to Beth because Yeah, like it was one of the best books I read over the course of this year, and I write lots of books and that sort of stuff. So I write lots of books. I read lots of books. So it really was one of my favorite books, and bringing together a couple of subjects that I'm fascinated with. So if you haven't read Beth's book, check it out. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much. I was like totally honored and tickled by that. So yeah, I think we're coming to the end of of our our interview here. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. I've enjoyed our correspondence, and it's just nice to have a real time conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do come to Bali in the future, then don't hesitate to reach out. Or if you get any questions about Bali, don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic to connect with you. And as soon as I read your book, I'd got a sample on Kindle, and I hadn't even finished the sample version of it. And I was like sending off, Beth, I'd like to have a conversation with you, or meet up with you, or have a session with you, or something like that. I was just fascinated to have a conversation more. So this has been extremely enjoyable for me, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you and whoever's listening. And hopefully whoever's listening got, one or two things out of it. If you got one or two things out of it, you're in front of where you were an hour and a half ago when you started listening to this. So thank you so much for your attention, your time and energy.
Ah, you're so welcome. Totally appreciate you. And just so everybody knows, next week I'm having Steve Falconer on. He's going to be at Anarchapulco. So let's just quickly get you the date. On the 12th, we're going to be having a chat noon Central Time. That's Central Standard Time now that they've changed our clocks. And so we're going to be actually talking about the evolution of the truth community. So this is a juicy topic. Yeah, he's been in it for a lot of years like you have, and seen things really shift and change and take off in 2020 in a different way. And I feel a change is happening now too in this whole, like, what is this? We're not in the crisis anymore. What is this relationship all about? And does it really match up? I'm kind of married to it through my platform, but so thank you very much, everybody, for joining and taking interest. Do look Carl up at his website. He's very responsive. So if you send him a message and you'd like to get some assistance with coaching and read his books, then you're in a good place.
Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone. I'm gonna sing us or play us out with my son again.